Greetings, fellow football managers. Today we're going to be talking about roles. First of all, I need to apologize if I sound like I've swallowed a frog and I've got two more in my sinuses, but I've been really feeling the love. I've loved the response that I've been getting to some of these videos that I've done recently, so I wanted to keep it going. This might be a slightly shorter one than usual, but that is because the topic of player roles is massive. So this is going to be something like a little mini-series. Let's start off with the back. Now, as you can see, I have chosen an absolutely nuts formation because I want to focus on the center of defense. And when you create a tactic, you normally put your central defenders into place first, after your keeper. The whole point of this video is to try and explain what are the different player roles and why you might want to play one player in one role rather than another role. As anything in Football Manager, the discussion is a lot more complex than that. How player roles perform on the field or don't may well depend on what general tactic you're playing and what the other roles are on the pitch, what the other players are doing, and in fact what the opposition team is doing as well. However, when I categorize my player roles, I like to look at four different factors. Factor number one is going to be, is it a specialist position or is it a more generalist position? So this central midfielder on support, these two defensive midfielders on support, those are generalist positions because you're not really asking them to do anything special. Their instructions are pretty much empty. If you look in there, there's nothing really that the guy is doing. A defensive midfielder will do certain things by being a defensive midfielder, but you can kind of customize everything about him and you can make him more of a specialist by giving him certain instructions. Some roles are like that by default. For example, if we look at the regista, this is a playmaking role. That's one thing to think about in a moment, but it's also very much of a specialist. You're looking at that Andrea Pirlo type player, although probably more of an aggressive playmaker than even Pirlo. The regista will do certain things. He will press a lot, he will drive forward in possession, he'll look for space all the time, he'll try and keep up with play. Very much of a specialist. If you think back to that old AC Milan team, Andrea Pirlo as the deep-lying playmaker or regista had Gennaro Gattuso next to him. Gattuso was also a specialist. His job was to win the ball and give it to Pirlo so that Pirlo could then start the phase of play. So these are two examples of two specialist positions, whereas a central midfielder on support or a DM on support is more of a generalist. The same thing goes for your ball-playing defender and your centre-back in that back line. These are the two most common roles that you're going to be using normally, and they're very much generalist. The ball-playing defender has a little bit more about him. If we look at this and take off the custom instruction, he has to hold position, so he's not going to charge up the field. He's also going to take more risks with his passing. So the ball-playing defender is going to look to play more aggressive passes. Let's contrast that to the central defender, who has shoot less often, dribble less, and hold position. By that we can infer that the ball-playing defender is allowed to dribble a little bit, also to shoot if he gets into position, although that's not normally a thing since he is way back down the field. So the ball-playing defender will dribble a little bit more than the centre-back or the central defender, and he will also play those attacking passes way more. The central defender on defend isn't asked to not take risks. He'll play a pass if it is on. If you want a guy who actually doesn't take any risks at all, go with the no-nonsense centre-back. This guy will kick the ball a lot more direct. He's also going to dribble less, shoot less often, and take fewer risks. So this is going to be your most defense-focused player. He's also probably not going to be a very good player. So if there's a player with poor vision and poor passing who you really don't want to try and break the lines with a pass because he's going to kick it straight to the strikers, that is then your no-nonsense centre-back. Essentially, we've explained three roles there. The centre-back, the ball-playing defender, and the no-nonsense defender is all about that passing discussion. So if we look at Van Dijk over here, passing 16, vision 14, dribbling is 12, first touch is 17. He's a classic ball-playing defender. He can dribble if he wants to, but he probably won't because his flair is also 11, so you won't see him dribbling that much on the field. He will do it now and then, but he's going to play some really nice passes. If we look at somebody like Konate, very decent first touch in dribbling, but his flair is low. So again, he doesn't really want to dribble even though he can. He might do now and then. His passing is 13, his vision is 10. So he's not as much of a ball-playing defender as Van Dijk is. If we look at Silva, now you've got somebody in the middle, passing 14, vision 13. So all of these guys are kind of in that mold of ball-playing defender, but Konate least of all. Therefore, I would play a player like Konate as a central defender and somebody like Van Dijk as more of a ball-playing defender because of those passing and vision attributes. So we talked about generalist and specialist. We barely mentioned playmaker though. The regista, as you see just a bit above, is a playmaking role, and I've mentioned in previous videos that a playmaking role will tend to attract the ball from other players. They're a bit of a ball magnet, as I like to say. The ball-playing defender is a little bit of a ball magnet in that back line. Your central defender on defend will tend to give it to the ball-playing defender because you're basically, by assigning these roles, you're telling the team, that guy's good on the ball, give it to him, he'll make a pass. That being said, the ball-playing defender isn't really a playmaking duty, so he's not going to be as heavy of a ball magnet as a regista or a deep-line playmaker or something like that. However, the libero is a little bit more of it. Your libero is the classic Matthias Sammer kind of player who is going to try and dictate play from the back, who's going to get the ball, drive forward, move forward when you're going into attack, get up the pitch. So if you want essentially a deep line playmaker coming out of your back line, you can choose a libero. The difference between libero on defend and libero on support is that a libero on defend, let's have a look at it here, has hold position, if you look at it on the left-hand side there. Hold position means he's not going to go too far forward. He's still going to get advanced from his centre-back position, and he'll go into sort of a defensive midfield on defend position. If you've played that role before, you would know exactly where the defend duty in defensive midfield is. Your libero on defend is going to go somewhere there with hold position. With support, the story is a little bit different. He's going to go even higher. As you can see now, there's no instructions. And this little graphic will show you that the libero moves up with the midfield to receive the ball and acts a bit like a playmaker. Again, not 100% of a playmaker role, but something approaching it. A libero is also what I like to call a shape changer. I'm not saying Virgil van Dijk is a werewolf. It would be horrifying if it was, and to some people probably a bit exciting. I'm not saying he is. What I'm saying is that these positions, they change the shape of your team. A libero perhaps not so much because the movement is only vertical, and there's a lot of movement that is vertical. Your wingbacks and fullbacks are vertical movers. Your central midfielder on attack is a vertical mover. Not the biggest deal, but it's uncommon to have a shape changer in that back line. You don't see that many teams who play that kind of thing. You are seeing it now probably with Manchester City, who play a libero at the back, but it's a very new invention from them. I should say innovation, not really invention. A libero is also a very mobile role because he will move up and down with the play. So he's not a static role like the ball-playing defender and a centre-back or central defender who will stay in one place. He's going to move a little bit more. So he's mobile, he's a bit of a shape changer, not really a playmaker, but definitely more so than his central defender colleagues, and he is a specialist. So those are the four little angles I'm looking at. Generalist versus specialist, shape changer or not, mobile or immobile, and playmaker or not. Some roles will dictate what the player does in defense, but generally a formation is looking at defensive shape. Our attacking and transition shape is what we dictate using roles and duties. So immediately we have the libero, who is going up vertically up the pitch when you are getting into possession. In fact, even in transition, your libero will start moving up the pitch. So, another reason to look at a role like a libero versus a ball-playing defender, even though they sound fairly similar, is that your ball player is going to stay in your back line and your libero is going to move out of that back line. So a lot of the time with player roles, you're going to be assigning those roles based on what kind of movements you want to see on the pitch. That's a really good way to think about it. If you're deciding between defensive midfielder and volante and you don't know what to do, for example, volante is a movement-based role. He's going to move up the field. Defensive midfielder isn't. So always think about your attacking shape and where you want your players to be in attack. That way you can set the right role that allows them to do that. It may not work sometimes, I will acknowledge that, because a lot of roles step on each other's feet. This edition of Football Manager is pretty good for that, where it doesn't happen as much, but you may sometimes see conflicts. For example, if I were to play a halfback in here, with so many players on defense and stuff, it can get a bit messed up. The last centre-back option we need to cover is the wide centre-back. Wide centre-back is fairly new. I think it came in a couple of years ago when people started looking at what Sheffield United were doing, getting their centre-backs underlapping and getting them up the pitch. Normally it would be your fullbacks, your Trent Alexander-Arnold, rather than your Konate, who would be moving up the pitch during the course of an attack. But if you want your centre-back to get up the field, for whatever reason, you can use a wide center back and then change the duty. So a defend duty will not go up so much. A support duty will kind of go into that midfield area. An attack duty will get all the way up the pitch and be a significant attacking threat. Now, does he go on the outside like a wing back? Does he go a bit more centrally? That depends on the shape of your team. As you can see from that little graphic, he will act like a wing back if he can. However, underlapping runs are also a thing. So whether he overlaps or underlaps or what he actually does on the field is going to depend very much on how your team shape is set up and what the other players are doing around him. Now then, I've set up my defensive line with a few different types of roles in there. I am going to touch on fullbacks and defensive midfielders in my next video, because I just want to keep this one short and sweet and look at your center backs. So I've set up 3 different roles. I've got my ball playing defender, my libero, and my wide center back in this defensive line. I've also configured some of the other roles here and there. Let's just see how it goes. I want to try and take this into the match engine and show you how these work, if at all. So let's confirm those changes. All right, so we've turned possession over to the other team, so hopefully we can see how this tactic works a little bit. Obviously, defensive shape is going to be as you saw it or when we were setting up our tactic. But now that we're in possession, let's see what happens. Immediately you can see Konate start to move out wide a little bit and Alexander-Arnold come in because he was set as an inverted fullback. Konate is the wide centre back. Or I think Alexander-Arnold was the fullback on defend and Konate was the wide centre back. And immediately we've got the overlapping run. And Konate, the wide centre back, is moving outside. If we look infield a little bit as well, we can see Virgil van Dijk, a libero, starting to move up, and poor old Antonio Silva, who is our ball-playing defender, is stuck at the back. So Trent was a fullback on defend. Could he have stayed back a bit further? Potentially. But he does have some really aggressive player traits. If you see a situation like this developing, and you have this big open gap here, you might be able to go to your right defensive midfielder and change him to a halfback. Now, halfback is a defensive midfield role that in situations like this, although we've just lost the ball, a few seconds before that, the halfback from here, where is he? Here, would actually be coming into this kind of area and acting as the centre back, whereas Konate, who was the centre back, is now almost a winger since he's on wide centre back. So that's just a little teaser of the halfback role. That's something I'll get into with my next video alongside the fullbacks and how we can play with things like inverted fullbacks, the complete wingbacks, and things like that. This has just been a touch into player roles. Again, I look at it in 4 different ways. I'll just let this match run now. I look at it with specialist versus generalist, your wide center back and your libero being very much specialists as opposed to generalists. You have your playmakers versus not playmakers. You have your mobile versus immobile. That's a very, very important one. And then you have your shape changes. So players like your halfback and inverted fullback are shape changes because not only do they go up and down the field, they go laterally to change your attacking shape as well. Look at that. Immediately, as we get the ball, our libero has off forward. So that's a very interesting pattern of movement that you can look to try and create by just changing a player role. As for which role you want to choose for your player, there are 2 ways to go about it. A specialist tends to need certain attributes, such as your libero. Virgil van Dijk is a perfect libero because he has all of it. He's got the physicals, he's got the mentals, he's got the vision, he's got the decision making, he's got absolutely everything you need that fills out that specialist position. A generalist could be kind of any player. You can play any player as a generalist and then let their individuality, their attributes, their traits, let those kind of color how the player performs that duty and that role.